Hi guys, so welcome to one of our first videos of the year. Today I want to talk to you about paper and all of the different types of paper. This is going to be really important for our master drawing project, but it's going to be just important as an artist to be informed. A lot of times when you go to the store, you will grab a sketchbook and you'll be like, oh, sketch paper. That's what I need. Or it'll say something like drawing paper. Well, what does that mean? And to understand that, we have to get a little bit deeper into what all of these other words say. So if we kind of zoom in here, I'll try to hold it steady so you don't get seasick. A couple things. It says sketch paper. It says it has a fine tooth surface. So the tooth basically means how rough or smooth it is. So if it has a fine tooth, that means it's got a little bit of a texture to it, but not so much that it would be inhibiting your ability to get a smooth line. This actually feels pretty smooth, all things considered. And then it has several other languages. Moving down here, it says acid-free for preliminary drawing dry media. So it's really not designed for wet media. And then it's got the number of sheets, it's got the size of the paper, but right down here is something really, really important where it says 60 pounds or 89 grams per square meter. So poundage or weight, which is what we will use is the correct term, your paper weight, and again it's written out in something like pounds, like 60 pound paper or 140 pound paper. What that means is how thick the paper is. The idea of poundage comes from how much a pound of a whole ream of the paper actually weighs, and so the thicker the paper, and I can't remember how many sheets are in a ream of paper, but you know that's basically how it goes. This what I'm actually drawing on is really thin printer paper, copier paper. So this is actually probably more like a 40-pound paper, really thin. You can actually see through it if I hold down, almost like tracing paper. So this paper here, the sketchbook paper, is maybe a little bit thicker, not a whole lot. It's got a little, you can still see through it a little bit. But if we compare that to this pad of watercolor paper at, if you notice over here, 140 pounds or 300 grams, this paper is really quite thick. And you can even see just in the way it bends versus the thinner paper, much more floppy. But you cannot see through this paper at all. It is really, really thick. And so the poundage of your paper, the weight of your paper, is a really important indicator. For our master drawings, I wanted you guys specifically to use a heavier weight paper, which is why I bought for you guys the larger kind of weight. The next thing we have to worry about when we're choosing our paper, obviously, is the tone of the paper. And papers come in lots of different subtle changes. You have these darker tones, and they come in a range of hue. You can also find papers that are like bright white. This is a whiter white paper, even though I know the lighting is making it maybe a little less white. But if you compare that to this paper, you should be able to see a little bit of difference. This has a little bit more yellow in it. It might be called a natural toned. Certainly the paper that I have in the background, you should be able to see the difference between this, and this. They're all, if you looked at it individually, you would probably assume they're all white papers, or they're all the color white. But there's actually quite a bit of hue and value change between them. So choosing the right hue is really important, or tone of your paper. And then lastly, which is my favorite part, I want to talk about the tooth of the paper. Okay, the tooth, they do not have teeth. They do not have buck teeth that come in here. Instead, the tooth is basically the surface and how smooth or rough the surface is. So smooth or rough. And you want to choose your paper based upon the media that you're working with. So if I'm using something like a charcoal pencil, I will probably want to have, in most cases, something with a little bit more roughness, a little bit more tooth. If I'm working with something like pen and ink or a Sharpie, something where I want a nice clean line, I would probably choose more of a smooth paper. Now, there are some other terms that you will see when you're looking at paper, and I want to kind of show them to you. So let's start with smooth. The term that we're often looking for when we're trying to find smooth paper, besides just putting our hands on the paper and feeling it, the term is called hot press. Hot press. So I don't know if any of you have ever done where you've ironed your own clothes or not, but hot press basically means that when they make the paper, it's rolled, the actual fibers of the paper are put onto a press and they're pressed out. And a hot press, just like a hot iron with your clothes, will get all the wrinkles out. And so this paper, I'll hold it up, not that you can necessarily see the surface, but it's very, very smooth. This would be great for pen and ink, for a pencil drawing where you don't want any of the surface texture to show. It's just a nice, clean, probably about 140-pound piece of paper. So very nice paper. Sometimes you're going to want a rougher paper, and so sometimes they'll just use the term rough. The other term that you can look for is called cold press. Cold press paper. And again, there's a range within that cold press paper, but basically that means they've pressed it out or they've rolled it out, but they have not taken and done they've not heated the press, so it's not quite as smooth. So I'm going to, again, hold this up in the hopes that you might be able to see some of the little texture that is here. This could still be a hot press. This is a really nice piece of paper. Probably linen or cotton fiber. This is a little bit of more of a cold press, and you can hopefully see some of that texture in there. I hope this is coming through in the video at all. Some papers have a particular kind of almost like a patterny texture to it. I see this a lot with charcoal paper, where you have just a little bit of a surface to it. This is not, again, too rough. But again, you really will see it with watercolor paper where there's a little bit more tooth. I'm going to see if I can get another piece of paper. So that's something just to be aware of when you're looking at your paper. These are all good papers for whatever. Oh, this watercolor actually had a little bit of a, not much tooth on that. So, but the best way to tell when you go to your local art supply store is to pick it up and feel the paper. Don't just judge it by your eye. There are some other different types of paper that I wanted to show you. Newsprint is great. A lot of times it's very thin, it's very cheap, but you can actually do some really nice drawings on newsprint. It is not archival. This paper will fall apart, in about 50 years. So you just have to know that you wouldn't want to do something that was going to last a long time. A lot of the other ones are acid-free. And then this is a type of paper that's kind of a special paper. We're not going to use it for this activity. This is called Duralar. And Duralar comes in clear sheets, but this is actually their matte film. And this is a beautiful, it's a plastic paper, but it holds pen and ink beautifully. It also will hold watercolor. It can, graphite can hold lots of different surfaces, and it's really cool because you can work on both sides of it or even layered to get some really nice effects. So acetate is another term for this kind of transparent paper, but Duralar is one of my favorite. There's another brand, and I think it's called Yupo paper, that is fine and one of my favorites. So again, just as a brief recap, so when you're looking at your paper, think about the media that you're going to be using on it. You want to really consider the weight, and again, weight tends to come in pounds. It can actually go way above 140. Some of the papers that you all might have may even be as much as 300-pound paper. Those are really almost, they feel almost like pieces of cardboard. They're so thick. And then you have to consider the tooth, whether you want a hot press, which is going to give you a really nice smooth surface like this bad boy here, or this is also obviously hot press, or whether you want one that's a little bit rougher, that's going to have texture like this cold press here or here. And again, some of them get really, really rough, particularly as the papers get thicker. So that's a little bit about paper. And I tried to choose what paper I thought was going to work best for you in your drawings. And hopefully I chose well. So thanks so much.